Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green, and this is God in America. A few weeks ago, I shared a video of Oklahoma State Representative James Shaw's presentation at the Lion's Den in Yukon, Oklahoma. After visiting my daughter and her family in Iowa, I returned to Oklahoma on July 11th and attended a John Birch Society meeting in Tulsa, where Representative Shaw lectured exposing the corruption of our state legislature. I hope you appreciate the work Mr. Shaw is doing, whether you're an Oklahoman or not. Please excuse the sound quality. I got as close to the speaker as possible, but wasn't wired into the sound. Here are Representative Jim Shaw's remarks.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Michael, thank you for the introduction there. Yeah, my name is Jim Shaw. I represent House District 32 here in the state of Oklahoma. A little bit about me in Oklahoma City. Went to Oklahoma State University where I met my wife, Deanna Joe, and we live now on the west side of Chandler, a little bit down the turnpike here, with our two girls that are 10 and 8 years old, and live on our ranch, which is called ACTS Ranch, which stands for All Creatures Great and Small. And as a result, or as you would have assumed, we raised a variety of animals that over the years has included, and I guess I am looking at my notes because the list is lengthy, has included buffalo, cattle, sheep, goats, rabbits, turkey, chickens, ducks, quail, and you cannot forget the security system of games. So prior to that excitement running for office a little over a year ago, I was in the oil and gas industry. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is kind of the green energy agenda and how we're being faced with that here at the state of Oklahoma and what we've been trying to do down at the Capitol to fight that. I was in the oil and gas industry my entire career. I started and began my career at Chesapeake Energy in Oklahoma City and then transitioned to a startup software and services business doing oil and gas with a former boss of mine. And I eventually became co-owner, president, and COO of that business. Years later, grew the business from a handful of contractors to a little over 100 employees in about 10 years. Decided to sell that business to a larger oil and gas software company going on about 3 years ago. During that time period with that business, as a main people, the year 2020 changed my wife and my perspective on a lot of things. As we were caught up in our own lives, creating a growing startup company, facing our girls in very little at the time, we were not openly involved in politics, although we knew things weren't right and we could see room for improvement. But as grocery shelves became empty and the truth was hard to come by, our eyes, like so many others, came to open up. And despite government overreach ruling the day, I'm happy to report that I never required any of our employees to get a COVID test, vaccination, or wear a mask in our place of business. These decisions went counter to the law requirements of other establishments and businesses, and you all know that very well, and were even met with opposition by other members of my leadership team, which, as a result, required a significant amount of discernment. A lot of thought, prayer, and forward thinking went into how we would handle COVID policy with our employees, and in the end, we absolutely chose the right path. Now, I'm trying to apply that same thought process into how I conduct myself in the legislature. No other issue has reminded me of the decisions I had to make during COVID as much as everything surrounding the quote-unquote green energy standard and the attempt that industry is making to take over and destroy our state and, quite frankly, the nation. This issue, much like COVID, encompasses so many areas of our day-to-day lives, like the economy, our food supply, greed from those in power, rampant misinformation, propaganda, and on and on. And this issue was ultimately what pushed me into doing what I'm doing today. The impetus to run for office came when I heard about the industrial wind project being proposed just a few slow miles from our range. The word got out that the wind company had had a private meeting with select large landowners in the area, and realizing the incumbent state representative that Michael talked about in the intro, at the time had zero interest in listening to his constituents. My wife and I began to get involved in a pretty big way. When I knew the Lord was leading me to run for this seat, Michael kind of shared a little bit about this. I was told, statistically speaking, I had a less than 5% chance of winning IRS. Statistics lie. Because of his position in the House, being the head of appropriations to the budget, and being honestly probably one of the top 5 most powerful people in our state government did it. And our race became famously known as the most expensive House race in state history. I was outspent at least 4-1. Some people have told me the margin may have been a lot higher than that. But as I keep saying it, I'll keep preaching it over and over. If you're an elected official on the wrong side of the green energy agenda, as more and more people are waking up to what a scam and a racket it is, you will get fired. Exactly what happened to the extreme establishment opponent that I went against. And I believe it's what we'll see more of at the 2026 election cycle. That is if people on a mass scale start standing up in the time to get familiar with the issues and familiar with the people who are making decisions for all of us. This session, so we're going to talk a little bit about this session. Our legislature passed 0 impactful legislation to slow down, let alone stop the green energy standard. A lot of bills were killed outright. We did actually get a bill passed through the House twice, and the Senate killed it both times. I also was the House author of the Senate bill that was attempting to retire approximately $14 million per year in state subsidies that we continue to allow this industry to have. We all know about the federal subsidies. So I was part of that bill. It's been in place, and that subsidy's been in place for a little over 10 years, or close to 10 years. It's set to run now in a few years. The Senate Energy Committee killed it with a 5-5 tie. I actually had the opportunity to go on a segment with Carl Higbee on Newsmax and discuss this along with a state senator from West Virginia, where I unfortunately got to tell a nation the truth of that Oklahoma legislators are completely sold out to the green energy volumes. And on that particular bill of retiring the state level subsidies, that main pushback that I got from other people inside the building at the Capitol was, well, we made a promise to industry. We got to keep the promise. We got to maintain the promise there. Even though what they're really saying is we made an investment with your taxpayer dollars in something that doesn't work. And we're not getting a return of investment, but we're still going to continue to fund it like we're supposed to. Now, our delegation in DC and the administration there, they have actually taken some steps in the right direction for us on these issues just recently. But the positive change in that could take years to fully materialize. And everyone here knows how quickly our administration is contained in DC. So we absolutely must remain vigilant to put policy in place at the state level now to weather the inevitable storm that always comes from the feds. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story about what happened in the Capitol as we're fighting green energy this year. So I was one of maybe a handful of representatives that put together a bill. Each of us put together our own bills to put into regulations on industrial wind. Setbacks, use a turbine to your home or property or what have you. So there's maybe 5 of us, and we have wildly different opinions on how to approach it and the distances and what have you. So leadership said, hey, we want the 5 of you to get together, add some big new bill, one single bill on industrial wind regulation, and then come back to us and let us know what you have. So we met multiple times, got in a meeting, talked it out. And honestly, those conversations were productive. They were respectful, professional. We still, very much debated and had differing opinions on what the actual language looked like. But as I was starting to kind of close in and iterate on that conversation, leadership came back to us and said, hey, we don't really know what you guys are working on, but if your bill doesn't say this, we really want to see yours. It should say this. So we go on a wild news chase for a while, and then they come back and tell us exactly what we should be doing, which, setting aside the differences that we already had in that room, we're all pretty united in being frustrated with having potentially wasted some time. So that ended up segueing into larger meetings, which now at this point we're including committee chairs, the chairs, some leadership is in the room, and we're starting to really try to hammer down this quote-unquote big bill on wind regulation. You always hear about kind of smoke-filled backroom deals that happen. Well, this was very much that kind of environment. Now, what I didn't know going in is apparently there's this unspoken oath that you take to go into those rooms. I didn't get that. And so I haven't told them, I'm like, hey, there's a minimum standard here that the grassroots is telling me that we need to be at, and I'm not going to go below that. And that really frustrated people in that room because they're like, well, that bad. Whenever we say it here, we're going to vote for it. I was like, it's not really going to happen. So ultimately, I'm going to pay it. They stayed really at that minimum threshold. So I ended up voting yes for that bill, but not before posing an official floor amendment on that bill that would have strengthened it a whole lot better than what it was. Now, when everybody in the room figured out how I was going to put an amendment on that bill, they lost their documents. You would have thought that I completely disavowed the oath. I basically stood there and was being yelled at by most of other representatives in the room for, I don't think, half an hour. Governmental was completely unwavering on my amendment, but the main issue that they had with that amendment was that it was going to put them on a hard vote the next day. And a hard vote really is simply they're being forced to debate between voting for what their constituents want versus what special interests. That's the hard vote, and they don't want to take that public hard vote. Even during that conversation, it's a little bit more of what happened in the building. During those conversations, there was a committee chair room, and I was continually referred to in that room as kind of the voice of the grassroots. So they would say, Shaw, what do you think about this? From the grassroots say about that, which was great. I was honored that they could look at me that way. And so as a result, there was a committee chair that said, I'm going to vote exactly the way that Shaw knows. I don't care what Bill says. What it does say, I vote his way, presumably because he and the grassroots was kind of on board with what I was trying to push, which was what they were pitching. Fast forward to when I completely disrupted the normal process and said, I'm going to throw an amendment. He said, yeah, I'm not on board with that. I'm going to try to get a bill. It went so far a couple of weeks later, the bill came back on the floor in a different version, debated against the bill and called these common sense regulations socialism, which is quite laughable because all of the inputs for wind and solar basically come from China, right? So the irony is fit in the building. Ultimately, again, the Senate killed those bills multiple times. But there was one part of that bill that we passed off the House floor twice, and I think would have been a step in the right direction, which was the county option. Now, ultimately, I would love to see the 700-foot industrial machines gone completely. Yes. But I do recognize that each county is different, and the people within their county should be able to set the regulations that made the most sense for them. Now, in a revealing move, when we passed this bill from the House and sent it over to the Senate was 100% against the county option. So the powers that be in the Senate do not believe citizens of counties should have to choice what happens in their area. You know, the overall industrialization of our farmland with green energy, I always tag on a little bit of a side note here. I can't go without mentioning as well the use of human as fertilizer. If I say the word biosolids or human earth, how many people in here, everybody should have hands know what I'm talking about? Okay, so there's definitely quite a few, some that don't. For those of you that know, human earth or biosolids coming from municipal waste facilities, it's human and industrial waste from the cities that are being trucked out to farm and ranch land and being spread as fertilizer. Farmlands that grow your food, by the way. In Oklahoma, it's one of only 13 states that still allow food to be grown in human and industrial waste. At best, your legislators lack discernment. At worst, they are complicit in the proliferation of contaminating our farm and ranch land, going down to the Oklahoma Municipal League, who potentially spent millions of dollars this past session fighting against legislation that would have regulated or banned the use of human errors for life. I had introduced a bill, a 3-part comprehensive plan. Number 1, we're going to ban the use of human error immediately. Number 2, the bag to initiate testing and studies and provide our report to the legislators so we would get their recommendation on how to deal with this going forward. And number 3, the most important piece, formulate remediation plans to help farmers who rely to their government and industry cronies to get their land back to healthy levels of operation.
All right.
But isn't it interesting if history repeats itself and we don't do anything to address the filthy practice of fever, that we are on a road to much of our rural food and crop production, which, by the way, Oklahoma City alone has at least 11 to 15,000 or more acres leased to land applied human growth fertilizer. That's just Oklahoma City. That's not Tulsa. I've been told about 95% of the municipalities across the state use this practice. And the majority of that 11 to 15,000 acres is just, Ivory, Oklahoma City, Tulsa. So if we're on a road to contaminating that much food and crop production, that could render the land unsuitable for farming or food production, which could then reasonably make them a high value target for green energy companies to put into industrial and solar complexes. The green energy companies being the industry that openly admits that they're trying to eradicate the oil and gas industry. The green energy companies that are trying to buy or lease in as much land as quickly as they can. So if that industry has equal powers behind it, and I choose that part very intentionally, the equal power behind it are trying to control the land, the energy market, and the food supply, controlling the populace becomes a whole lot easier. Yeah. A stated method of Agenda 2030, you all probably know this and can recite it as well, to achieve its goals is the importance of partnerships and collaboration among governments, civil society, and the private sector. Now, anytime I hear public-private partnership, I immediately skeptical. Public entities ultimately have a responsibility to the taxpayers, while companies have a responsibility to produce profits. Now, some people argue that, in favor of these kinds of partnerships, that they can be useful and sometimes provide more efficiency. However, they are also extremely vulnerable to becoming a source of crony capitalism, which by very definition is an economic system where businesses and individuals with political connection to receive unfair advantages. It's basically summed up green energy. Some key characteristics of crony capitalism that you all are familiar with: political connections, favoritism, government intervention. Examples of how they achieve that: subsidies. You all know about subsidies. Regulatory favoritism, public contracts, and the overall impacts could be reduced down to reduced competition, economic inequality, and public distrust, because it fosters a political environment where the system is perceived as rigged, leading to widespread discontent. Now, I would assume most people in here have a certain level of discontent and have a very strong perception of belief that the system is rigged. And I can assure you, having only been in the legislature one session, it is absolutely rigged in many, many ways. Many of these green energy companies that get those benefits and the favoritism, the special treatment from our government, are multinational foreign entities to begin with. And they absolutely do not care about you. They do not care about the state or whatever state that you may be in, and they certainly don't subscribe to the same conservative values. If you look at the countries of origin where these businesses are headquartered, I assure you they don't have the freedoms that we have in this country, and they certainly do not have the conservative values that we proclaim to have in the red state of Europe, right? The vast majority of the parts we talk about this related solar come from China, one of our biggest threats globally, and arguably now also a domestic threat because of the significant land holdings that they have across the country, including Oklahoma. The businesses they own are invested in here, including energy companies and more. I also introduced a bill this year to actually criminalize the ownership of Oklahoma farmland. And so again, our legislature shut it down and wouldn't even give it to the hearing. My bill would require that investment of current employees within 12 months. And after that, it would have been a felony for a citizen of a hostile foreign nation that owned farmland in Oklahoma. Failure to divest would result in jail time. Fine. It is time for state legislators to put the interests of their constituents and their state at the forefront of their actions instead of shrugging it off and passing an undershield bill that doesn't criminalize this stupid practice. During my campaign, this issue was part of my platform. It was a big part of my platform. The governor of Oklahoma himself came to my district, or not, on multiple events, did multiple social media videos saying that I was a liar and that it was already illegal for Chinese or others to own farmland. How many of you live, whether in Oklahoma or elsewhere, in a rural part of town where there's illegal marijuana grows that are clearly being manned by Chinese or other hostile foreign nationals? Yeah. I haven't seen anybody going to the area. So I remain steadfast in my assessment that our state laws are absolutely insufficient on this issue because of a lack of genuine discernment from your state legislators. I'm going to close up here. How do we address these issues? Let me ask you a question. Have any of you heard that the Oklahoma City Thunder just won a national championship?
Yes.
You don't know about that? Yeah. Of course you did. Everybody knew about it. Constant coverage of the gangster leagues, countless news pieces about it, and hundreds of thousands of people attended the post-celebratory parade in Oklahoma City. Hundreds of thousands. Now, there's nothing wrong with us getting excited about basketball game, getting excited when our team went to national championship. But how many people are watching our state legislature that closely? No, very little. The people who are casting a vote on issues that affect your day-to-day lives and your children's futures. Let me ask you another question. Do you know the name of your state representative or senator? Have you contacted them, gone to their office, or otherwise demanded to them to get involved in issues that are important to you and your family? I know everybody in this room is involved in this group, and you all are. So I would assume that the answer to that would probably be yes from most people in there. But how many of your family and neighbors can say the same? Yeah. Lastly, I'm going to leave you with a quote from Daniel Webster, and I quote, "I apprehend no danger to our country from a foreign foe. Our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter. From the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government, from their carelessness and negligence, I must confess that I do apprehend some danger. I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that in this way they may be made the dupes of designing men and become the instruments of their own undoing. Make them intelligent, and they will be vigilant. Give them the means of detecting the wrong, and they will apply to it." Ladies and gentlemen, I feel the red day is coming soon. And if we can wake our friends and neighbors up to what's happening right here in Oklahoma, I believe we can solve these issues.